Welcome to the US AVD User Group YouTube channel. Coming up is the recording from a live online user group meeting. Please use the link below to become a member of the community and join us for our free monthly events. And don't forget to like and subscribe. Let's get started.
And we're in the shirt from the last MMS that I went to today. So you'll get to see me in something that's a shirt that's 10 years old, but I've taken good care of it. All right. Well, like Travis said, this user group meeting will be recorded. Thank you all for coming to the US AVD user group. Today, we're going to have a presentation by NetApp on NetApp Files. But before we get there, we're going to go ahead and talk over some of the new things in the AVD world that are beneficial. Again, the meeting is recorded. What we'll do is at the end of the meeting, we'll stop the recording, so that way, if there are any questions, you can feel free to ask questions without worry about it having it recorded. So again, we're going to go ahead and talk about the group, and we're all here today, and then some AVD updates, and then we'll get into our presentation, transform and optimize AVD performance with Azure NetApp Files with Manoj Menon and Greg Marino. Is that how you pronounce your last name, Greg? Okay.
It's Marino.
Marino.
Marino. Okay, like
Yeah.
Dan Marino.
Yep.
Okay, excellent.
Like Dan Marino, yep.
All right. And of course, we got to go over some housekeeping here, member expectations. I don't think it's an issue, but of course, we want to go over it just to make sure that we said, hey, yeah, we're following this. We want to treat everyone with respect. We encourage everyone to be involved in the community. Share this group with others that may have an interest in Azure Virtual Desktop, Windows 365, anything regarding virtualization, please share. And also, if you want to stand out, please feel free. You can become involved in this group, or when we discuss a specific topic, raise your hand and speak about your experiences, and everyone will be happy to hear it. All right, we talked a little bit about this before we started, but Ignite is happening next week. If you're going to attend it virtually, the days are the 15th through the 16th. But if you're going to actually be one of those lucky few that were able to make it into Seattle, it's going to be November 14th through the 17th. So look at the catalog, see if there's anything you want to view as far as the online sessions. Encourage everyone to do that. You can get a lot of good information. Also, for those that have been around the Microsoft conferences, Tech Ed, Old School MMS, and Ignite, they also announce a lot of new features, new products at these events. So, stay tuned and be sure to at least keep an eye out on what's coming out of Ignite, because most likely it's going to impact all of us in the future. All right, so here's what's new with AVD since we met last month in October. The AVD client desktop, the desktop client was the next version was released on October 17th. And then also we have the insider release that came as well. As far as what's new with the actual public release, now you could have parameters to configure multiple monitors with URI, when you type stuff out. Also additional language support. It supports Czech, Hungarian, Indonesian, Korean, Portuguese, and from Portugal and Turkish. So those are the additional language supports that is with the full AVD client. Also, it fixed an issue with Teams media optimization where it could cause a crash. That was fixed, and then improved logging and diagnostics added to this new version of the desktop client. And now this feature is actually in preview, utilizing OneDrives with remote apps in AVD. Now, this was something that wasn't available. So, if you had a remote app, OneDrive files weren't available to that app session, but now it is, and this feature is in preview. Again, the session hosts need to be Win11 22H2 build 25905 or later, and we have a link up here where you can get more information. But this is big, especially if you set up like one of the Office products like Excel or Word as a remote app, now you can actually have natively access to your OneDrive. Also, there's an update to the web client. If you utilize the web client, you can now utilize light and dark mode, which I know was a request that even some of my AVD clients asked for. You can actually view your resources in a grid or a list. Some people just prefer lists, so now you have that option to view it in a list. And then you can also reset web clients to their default. So, you can go in and change like, how many monitors you want to utilize and whatnot. You can actually reset that all at once. And again, here's a link for more information on that. All right, we're going to go ahead and get started. Alex, did you want to go ahead and introduce Manoj and Greg, or even though I kind of already did, but I'll go ahead and I'll pass it over to Alex.
I will do just a really brief intro here so that we can get going into the presentation. Thank you so much, Chris and Travis. My name is Alex Masui. I'm an Azure specialist here at NetApp. I get the honor to get to work with folks like Manoj and Greg on a daily basis, helping support Azure NetApp Files. And today's presentation, as I think most folks here on the call had a chance to see when they signed up, is ANF, which, by the way, is one of the best kept secrets, we believe, in the Azure portal. So ANF in an AVD environment. So that's what you're going to see today. These two gentlemen are going to kind of step you through that. At the end, I am going to share in the Teams chat a link to a form that anyone on this call can fill out if they would like some more detail or just a deeper one-on-one conversation about your particular environment and maybe some architectural questions about ANF and how it could support AVD. For your time in filling out that form, you will qualify for a gift card. We've got, for the first 40 folks that would fill out a form, we have got some gift cards available for $25. So without any further ado, I'm going to pass the baton over to Manoj. And as I mentioned, I'll just share in the Teams chat that link. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Alex. Good evening, folks. My name is Manoj Menon, and I am one of the cloud solutions architect for Azure NetApp Files. Based in Minneapolis, it's slightly a little cold here. Well, it's getting cold. And with me, I have Greg Marino, who is the lead cloud solutions architect for Azure NetApp Files, working with me alongside. So, I'm sharing my screen right now. You all can see it?
Yes.
Perfect. Thanks, Greg. And before the presentation, I wanted to kind of set the stage what exactly we're going to cover today. We're going to talk a little bit about what and how Azure NetApp Files is constructed as a storage hierarchy, and what is the benefit that it brings into to the table when it comes to AVD. We'll be covering a little bit of basic design architecture of multi-session and integration details of ANF using FS logics and app attach, and an example architecture, detailed configuration information, and performance tested validation for 500 users on AVD, which we did using Azure NetApp Files. And along with, we also have some performance validation when it comes to scalability and prove the benefits of performance using ANF, Azure NetApp Files. Azure NetApp Files is also fondly called as ANF. What is Azure NetApp Files? So Azure NetApp Files is a first-party Microsoft service which is sold, supported, and delivered by Microsoft itself. It's a first-party native platform, and it's a co-engineered PaaS offering with 99.99 high availability, SLA. And it's natively integrated into Azure's network, placed in a special purpose subnet called delegated subnet within the Azure VNet. So what this delegated subnet is basically, it will enable you to designate a specific subnet of Azure PaaS offering service of your choice. In this case, it's ANF, which will need to be injected into the virtual network. And subnet delegation provides full control of your for you to manage and do the integration of Azure services into Azure Virtual Network. So when you delegate a subnet for Azure NetApp Files, you are allowing basic network configuration rules for that subnet, which basically helps Azure NetApp Files to operate its instance in a stable manner. Azure delegated subnet also assigns a pool of IP address to serve the service and injects into your private space, VNet space. So it is never publicly accessible. ANF is never publicly accessible. So you would need a delegated subnet in order to spun up an ANF instance. It's again built and supported by Microsoft. And you can manage Azure NetApp Files through Azure Portal, Template, PowerShell, CLI, Ansible, and Terraform. You may see in this architecture, you may see there are two clusters, the bare metal fleet, basically. And these bare metal fleets are on-tap cluster sitting in the regional data centers in Microsoft's regional data centers. So it's, like I said, it's a fully managed PaaS offering by Microsoft, giving your tenants direct access to the all the power and capabilities of the high performance storage inside your VNet in the Azure without any overhead of managing and maintaining any hardware or operating system. What it means is it brings the storage array into the Azure's own regional data centers and wiring them up directly to the compute, which gives the customers VNet direct access to the NetApp's high performance clusters, on-tap clusters, which you're seeing right now. So that's the bare metal fleet. This specific slide is very important. It will technically talk about how exactly the Azure NetApp file storage is constructed. So under the Azure subscription, you will have to create something called as Azure NetApp account. And so this is completely different from the Azure storage account. This is purely for Azure NetApp account. It's a logical construct. Once you create it, you are going to create something called as capacity pool under the NetApp account. And under the capacity pool is where you're going to create the client access volumes like SMB, NFS, or dual protocol volume. So when I talk about the capacity, you would see something called as ultra and premium and standard. And those ultra, premium, and standard are the SKU or the service level for the capacity, which I'll be talking about in a bit in the upcoming slides. But the capacity pool is where you're carving out the capacity, and it can start from 4 terabyte to 500 TB. And each capacity pool, under one NetApp account, you can have up to 25 capacity pool. Now, when I say 4 terabyte, you can also have a 2 terabyte, but there are some networking standards that we will have to meet to spin up a 2 terabyte capacity pool. Under that, you're creating the client access volume. Like I said, the minimum is 100 GB and the maximum is 100 TB, but you can also have a 500 TB volume as under the capacity pool. So which comprises that you can go up to 12.5 petabyte of enterprise NAS storage under a single Azure NetApp account. It's that powerful. Performance and sizing. This is another important slide because most of the application and high enterprise workloads with high intents of high operation and latency. So this is configurable in two factors, right? Like I was explaining about the service levels, there are ultra, premium, and standard, but each of these service level are they have a definitive or they have a defined throughput limitation. Well, it's not a limitation basically. It is a defined service level throughput where it can go up to. So what I'm trying to say is the two factors. One is the service level, another one is the volume quota, which equates to the performance. What it means is, say for example, you pick up a performance pool called premium pool, and like you say, if you create a premium pool, it can go up to 64 megabytes per second per terabyte. So if I create a 50 terabyte capacity pool, I'm multiplying into 64 megabytes per second, and it can sum up to 3.2 gigabytes per second, all up, sum up. So it's that efficient. So let's take an example. You create a 10 terabyte volume, and it's a premium volume. You're going to get 640 megabytes per second just for that volume. So the logic here is, as and when you increase the capacity of the volume, the performance also increases. The Azure NetApp Files resiliency, the data protection, is one of the key features where you have the ability to take a snapshot, do a replication regionally, and do a replication zonally, along with backing it up, along with taking a thick cloud. You're creating a volume. Either it can be NFS, SMB, or a dual protocol. You can take snapshots of that volume and revert that same snapshot to the same volume or to different volume within seconds. You can replicate that volume directly from one region to another region. There is a supported regional metrics in Microsoft, and only the supported regional metrics will allow this replication. So you can replicate from one site to another site. You can also take thick clone of that replicated volume to a different volume, just in case, if you want to do any kind of testing in the dev environment. One other thing is dynamically changing the service level. So what it means is, you have a volume, you have a capacity pool with Ultra. You don't have to have the same Ultra capacity pool in the DR side, which will increase the cost. So you can go for a normal standard capacity pool, and you can change that dynamically even when you would need a performance in the DR side in an event of a DR. So it is seamless when you can directly change the service level of a volume from one SLA to another SLA, basically a service level. And it is non-disruptive. It happens at the backend. The clients would not know it. You would see another feature called cross-zonal replication. So basically, you have the ability to do a cross-zonal replication as well within the region. And this is another slide of VD architecture that I would like to have Greg speak about.
Thanks, Manoj. Yeah, I'm going to cover a couple of slides just talking about the VDI architecture so that we are in line with the architecture and how ANF can fit into the environment. From a high level, 1,000-foot overview from the VDI architecture, you basically have three different environments that are available in Azure. One of those is the Azure Virtual Desktop environment, which you have your remote desktop clients that are going to connect into the Azure Virtual Desktop environment, and then they'll have an AVD agent that's being used on the back end to deliver the virtual desktop experience out to the users. You can also utilize Citrix as well. There's Citrix clients that are out on the front end, and you kind of have a dual role that you can choose here, where for the Citrix environment, you could use the Citrix management plane and use their virtual apps and desktops, and then use their virtual desktop agent. But what you can also do, and we seem to have a lot of customers doing lately, is to be able to use the Citrix clients and use the very front end of the management plane to do the management of the environment. But then they'll actually utilize Azure Virtual Desktops with session hosts and whatnot behind the management plane from Citrix, and then you'll be using the AVD environment just like you would be using it if you were using Azure Virtual Desktop, but you'll still have the Citrix management plane for it. So that's another option that you can utilize with Citrix. And then there's also some VMware clients out there, and there's a VMware Horizon Cloud on Azure that you can use to connect in and utilize the Horizon environment inside of VMware. And again, you'll have an agent for that one. So those are some of the different use cases we have around the AVD environment. And if you can move on one more slide there, Manoj. I think you have control. Yep. Just wanted to go over the AVD object model environment as the next step. And then after this one, we'll talk about where and how we integrate ANF into the environment. From the object model, and I know this is the AVD users group, so I'm guessing that you have a pretty good understanding around the model, but we'll have our tenant that we have at the high level, and that's going to be where our Azure AD environment or Entra ID is housed today. If you're not aware, they're changing the name of Azure AD to Azure Entra ID. And then underneath that tenant, you'll have your subscription, and then in your subscription, you'll create a host pool. And in that host pool, you can specify how many VMs you want to create to deliver the services out to the individual users. You can also set that up as a auto grow environment so that you can have 2 host pools that you start with. And then as the load grows, as it's coming into the environment, you can have it automatically add another virtual machine to the host pool so that you can deliver more sessions out of it. And then as the load goes down, the count will go down to the minimum and maximum accounts or accounts that you have inside of the host pool. Underneath the host pool, then we've got the session host. That's where the users are actually going to connect into. And then we also have the app side where you have the application groups in case you want to be doing anything with remote apps that you're using inside of the environment. Down at the bottom, we've got the traditional user sessions. So that's going to be client desktops that are coming in, whether it's the remote desktop or a Citrix or a VMware client. That's where they'd be connecting into. And then you have the remote app and the remote desktop access to get to the individual applications. One of the other things that is nice with the host pools is that you can create those with session hosts. So you're doing either multi-session or single session, depending on the requirements of the user. So you have the option of having different session hosts that you have out there for individual users versus multi-session users. And then you can create as many host pools as you need based on the workloads. So many times we'll see, if you've got an office style workload that people are using, they'll create one host pool with a certain image that gets put on the host pool. And then if you've got a set of users who need higher performance, maybe they need it for AI or machine learning or something like that, they typically have a separate host pool. So you can have different host pools that the users connect into to be able to get the services that they need and deliver them out to the desktop. The nice thing about the entire AVD model is that you see the model here, but really there's only a few things that you really have to manage from the front end, and that's maintaining your images and then getting those virtual machines set up in your host pools. After that, most of the management is being done by the PaaS offering of AVD. Any questions on that? Okay. I know you can move forward then.
Sure. Thank you, Greg. And this is another slide. It's a use case slide that we use when we are talking to the customer, and it does kind of give a nice visual. In that you have on the right hand side, if you see, you got the host pools represented here. Here, and the virtual desktop session icons. This is exactly where the Azure NetApp Files comes into play. So when each of these users log in, their profile needs to sync with FSLogix, and it will be housed with an SMB share. And these profiles are actually VHD files. So before I get into the explanations of the diagram, I just wanted to kind of talk a little bit about the animated points that I did. It's natively it's a native service, and for easy deployment and scalability, single shared platform for FSLogix and AppAttach and generic file shares. For the FSLogix and AppAttach, I'll be talking about that in a little more in a clear way. And enterprise performance, IOPS with low latency, and online scalability of capacity and performance. This online scalability of capacity and performance, I'll be talking about this at the latest slide, because I took a screenshot of a testing that we did, and I wanted to kind of show you how exactly we can do an online scalability of the capacity to meet certain performance requirement when the performance is under provision, when the capacity is under provisioned, and then meeting the exact performance limitation based on the app, based on the access. Again, it's a PaaS service. No VM resources are required, and integrated snapshots with backup and DR, like we spoke, and maximum compatibility. Supports SMB 2.1, 3.1, and SMB 3. And there is something called as continuous availability. It's an option in ANF, and it does the transparent failovers of the session in when there is any kind of disruption in the service itself. It's a feature that we normally recommend the customers to enable. And when you create an SMB volume, you will find that feature in the ANF portal. Again, native Active Directory domain services integrated. I was about to talk about this slide, and see if you see this right. When you what happens here is like when the users log in, FSLogix is designed to point to an UNC path on an SMB share, and if we have Azure NetApp Files at the backend, it is going to serve up that purpose, right? So VHD files then attaches to the session host, and then the user logs on while the stream happens, stream happens over the network. And again, that's where the throughput piece really comes into play. That's exactly when Azure NetApp Files shines. And we will go through that, in detail, like I was explaining, because the online scalable and capacity performance is one of the key factors that I wanted to kind of explain at the latest slide, where I have taken a screenshot. And you are going to also find any redirected folders that might be set up by the admin, whether they are redirecting a desktop or a doc, pictures, videos, etc. Right? And then if you're utilizing AppAttach, which is a newer technology for essentially doing this, it doesn't live in the profile. It's kind of a sister service for the FSLogix family. And what AppAttach does is, it allows you to encapsulate the applications in a VHD file and streams the application. So let's say I'm a user, right? And I log into the desktop, and my admin has set up a Microsoft Word, for example, with AppAttach. And Word wouldn't actually be installed on the virtual machine that I'm logging on when I log into when I launch the icon on the desktop. So if most of the functions, the function, it function automatically or almost exactly the same way that I was explaining about the FSLogix profile, where exactly it streams the applications from the shared storage. This is another reference architecture testing that we did. We used something called as login VSI, and we did a large reference architecture design test sometime back. So this was done sometime back, and I wanted to basically say it's a stale information. So the reason it's a stale because shortly thereafter, sometime back, Microsoft introduced advancements in performance of Azure Premium Files, and there was a customer who had set up everything in Azure Files. I'm not trying to compare the product. I'm just trying to bring in a use case here, and they were seeing some significant performance throughput issues, and it was taking as much as 10-minute login wait time with the FS Logics, and they decided to move to Azure NetApp Files, and that significantly dropped just a few seconds. So it's all about those performance issues, right? Again, we're not trying to compare the performance. We're not trying to compare the product. We're just trying to compare the performance, and what fits, what would be the best fit for the customer's use case. And but at that time, we thought that comparing this with the 500 user reference architecture would be a good test. So we did this, and in this reference architecture, we built out. We had a tool called Login VSI, which simulates the logon activity. And again, we did this testing. We basically set up a 10 Windows session host, and there were 8 of those where you can see that there are, in this case, there are DS16. So DS16s are pretty fairly beefy servers, virtual machines, and we created a simulated environment with 500 users, and all at one time, and ran a number of different testing scenarios against that. And what here you see during this 500 user testing scenario, we successfully ran the test, and we recorded the storage network performance. The storage hit a peak of 2,700 IOPS, and with an average of 2,300 IOPS during steady state. The steady state is a period of the test after all the desktop have logged in to the login BSI, and which starts running the applications and the testing at the backend. So we found out 65% of the total IOPS were due to writes, and 35 were due to reads. And this is much different than the on-premises. Then we did this for the throughput and latency. We ran the workload with the login VSI VDI testing tool. The latency was phenomenal, excellent, and it was less than a millisecond. So logons were excellent too, and we saw one user logon with 5.76 seconds, even during the middle of the test. So, and for the throughput, we saw 70 megabytes per second and 60 megabytes per second average during steady state for this testing. Again, it was really, really excellent, and it was really phenomenal testing, that experience that we had. And again, throughput is important, but with high latency, it's not, right? And the high throughput with low latency is what affects the profile loads. This specific screenshot, this chart basically illustrates a scenario where Azure NetApp Files based SMB volume was under provisioned, and it was not able to meet the throughput demand generated by the workload. So therefore, leading excessive storage latency and poor user experience. So this is exactly where I was telling you in the previous slide that I'm going to talk about the online scalability and how exactly we can scale the performance of the volume to meet the performance. So if you see this, I would just try to animate it. So the maximum performance you need, you're basically adding the throughput dynamically to the volume. Either you can increase the capacity or you can move the volume to a different SKU altogether. It's seamless, no downtime required, and the client access would not know it.
It's that simple, it's that straightforward. So just imagine if the clients are accessing a volume here in this capacity pool and say that, hey, listen, my application is choking up, my application is not performing well enough. And either you can increase the volume or you can move that volume to a different capacity pool altogether without a downtime. No service level, no disruption, no everything is seamless, straightforward. Any questions on this?
Hey, this is Travis. So you can, just so I understand, you can increase the IOPS or the performance without increasing the capacity?
No, you have to increase the capacity of the volume. Because like I said, the performance of the volume is tied up with the capacity pool itself, right? So say for instance, you have a 2 terabyte capacity pool of premium. It can go up to 128 megabytes per second. So you create a 1 terabyte volume out of which it can go up to 64 megabytes per second. And what if you want to max out the performance limitation of that volume? You have only 2 terabyte, so the remaining is 64. So you can increase the volume to another 1 terabyte, which makes it 2 terabytes. So it becomes 128 megabytes per second. So you will have to increase the volume in order to meet the performance requirement.
Right, thanks.
And so this is the slide where I'm going to talk. This was one of the common things, right? For the fact that we are going to do a volume shaping here to meet the performance requirement. But this is one of the common things that we hear from the customers around the user experience. And what happens when the in a real kind of heavy hit here, this is exactly when the FS logics takes the precedence of log in and log off. So any streaming operation, or let's take a step back. I think I spoke about a streaming operation in the previous slides. And when we talk about any streaming operations, it's a lot of activity that happens when you log on to the session and when the profiles connect, and then when you log off, it does really kind of do any kind of streaming if you choose out of the VHD file. So here in this, it's an animated slide I'm going to talk about. There is a tremendous amount of activity on the disk at one point in time. And if you see it, okay. And these are the operations that typically will really kind of hammer the storage, and where the end users start to see the degradations in performance. So knowing that we have Azure NetApp Files in terms of capability, and to what we commonly call something called as volume shaping, which in other words, dynamically changing the service level performance to up or down based on the capacity of the volume, which will give additional performance in certain scenarios. So whereas in other storages, I don't want to name the storage, but whereas in other storage, we typically don't have this specific option, because you will have to technically crank it up anytime you want to, and you will have to wait for a waiting period of 24 hours before you bring it back down. ANF is not like that. It is seamless. Anytime you can do it. You don't have to wait for a certain amount of time after you increase the performance on the volume or decrease the performance on the volume. So you have you are really sizing the volume to its maximum throughput capabilities. And this is one of the most significant feature that ANF brings in when it comes to it's not only for AVD, it's for any application or any other workloads for that matter. Any questions here so far? Oh yeah, John, please.
How does it know when to do that? Does it breathe on its own, if you will, or are you setting it, hey, there may be a time here between like 7:30 and 8:30 when I'm going to get pounded here with a logon storm? How does it know that?
So that's a great question, John. Technically, you can, Greg, you want to share about that logic app script, or you want me to explain that? Because there is a way you can automatically do that with logic app script, but it is not integrated with ANF. It is something that you will have to do it with the logic app script.
Yeah, so there's two different options you really have to do that with. One is that if you know that, if your business that you have follows the same pattern every day, where if people come in at 7 in the morning and they leave at 5 in the afternoon, and that login storm lasts for 20 minutes on each end or whatnot, you can go through and just set up some thresholds that you want to have at that point, so that once you hit 7 o'clock in the morning, probably around 6:45 or so, you're going to want to start cranking up the performance, and then let it drop down, maybe at like 8:30, go back down to the normal level. And then once you get near the 5 o'clock at the end, then you can have it automatically go back up again, go back down. That can be done with scripts that just get integrated in with the Azure NetApp Files solution. You also have the option, if you want, though, as well, to monitor the metrics that are occurring from the Azure NetApp Files service, so that you can see when the performance is starting to go up, if it's more spiky and it's not consistent. Then you can look at where those spikes are, and the logic app will return the metrics back to you. And you can say, when I get to a certain level of throughput, when we're starting to get above a level of throughput than where we currently are, you can adjust that level of throughput up and then monitor it. And when it starts to go back down again, then you can decrease the throughput through a logic app to do that. So there's kind of two different ways you can handle that, depending on what your workloads look like.
Okay, how does that impact cost?
So it does impact the cost, and that's the benefit of it, is that if you're able to stay at a lower state, like Manoj just showing there in the bottom diagram, your costs are going down, so you're not paying as much for those resources, because you don't need that throughput all the way up at 89.6 megabits per second, like you have in the top one. So you're already bringing your costs down for that. When you go in and increase the throughput up, you will have costs that go up during that time. And then when you bring it back down, you'll go back down to the baseline cost.
So is this a way of expanding my volume to get more IOPS, but only for just a wee little bit of time? Or I'm just trying to put it all together, if you will.
Yes. So
Yes.
It's a way of being able to expand your throughput, IOPS and throughput, when you need that extra performance, and then you bring it back down and go to the normal level. So it is a cost savings option for you to do that, but you're typically not going to do this, every hour kind of thing. If you've got a workload that's every hour, that may not be the best fit for it. So it really depends on the workload profile you have for your VDI environment. Does
Okay,
that help?
thanks. Yes, it does very much. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Greg. And John, that's a great question, John. One other thing I wanted to talk about is the features, the public features and the GA features that was recently announced. And for Azure NetApp Files, the documentation is in Microsoft site, and you'll find every information about the Azure NetApp Files information, what and all features went public and what and all features went GA, and how exactly it could be a very useful feature in your environment. There are certain features specifically utilized for AVD, and but there are other features, which is in generic, certain features are designed for SAP, certain features are designed for Azure Virtual Machine Solutions, and certain features are designed for generic files. So these are some of the features and functionalities that was recently released, and it has been there for a while. And I would strongly encourage you go to this site and see these features. And if there is any question, so if you need any kind of deep dive demo of the product itself, please reach out to me, Greg, and Alex, and of course Travis too, and so that we'll be happy to jump on a call with you and talk more about the product and its capabilities and functionality. I'm based in Greg and I and Alex are here in the US. Well, I'm in the Minneapolis, Greg is in Virginia, and Alex is in Minneapolis too. Travis is in Minneapolis too. So please reach out to one of us. We'll be happy to jump on a call. Any other questions?
If
It
we're
is very
waiting
dark
for
here.
if we're waiting for questions, I'll just pipe in, because one of the reasons that I've really taken interest in ANF is because the one problem, or one, I don't want to say problem, obstacle with DR and AVD. If you have profiles, and if you need those profiles in another region, there is no way with native Azure tools to replicate those. So that's where NetApp Files comes in, is you can copy that snapshot to a second region. I know that's not really a question, it's more of a comment, but the other thing, and I don't know if a lot of people know this, but when you back up, and I don't mean to bash Azure, of course, but I'm just saying, facts about the product. When we back up Azure file share, it's not a vaulted backup, meaning that it takes the Azure backup manages the snapshots, but it doesn't copy that data to another storage account. So if something were to happen with that storage account, now there's many different layers of protection, like soft delete and stuff, so it's not really a big concern. But if you do need that data copied to another vault, that's not something that happens natively in Azure Files. Anybody else have questions?
It's a quiet group.
I'm trying to soak it all in, wrap my head around it. It's pretty cool, though.
And well, I'll ask another question. I think I know the answer, but how about Azure AD joined session hosts? Is Azure NetApp Files supported for FS Logics in that scenario?
Yeah, so with Azure AD Join, we do have a solution for that where you can have the session host be connected up to Azure AD as opposed to your Azure Active Directory services. And then there's a domain controller that still needs to be in Azure, just like you would have for Azure Files if you do it in that scenario. You still have to have the domain controller in Azure. You're using Entra ID, they call it Azure Entra ID copy, I think it is. I can't remember the name of the new Entra ID one. It used to be called Azure AD Connect. Use Azure AD Connect to replicate your users and groups into Azure AD, and then you can utilize those users and groups to connect through your session host directly into Azure AD for your authorization and credentials.
Okay.
And still have the ANF volumes mounted.
Yeah, that sounds like it has parity then with Azure Files, where you can use a Entra ID or Azure AD join session host, but the user account has to be sourced from Windows AD.
Correct.
Okay,
Correct.
good.
Yep.
I
Yeah,
didn't think that was there, but that's good to know.
Yeah, and there's a document that we have on that out on the Azure website. So if you go out under the Azure website and just look for Azure NetApp Files, there's all kinds of documentation in there, and there's a link in there for it. We can post that link in the chat as well.
Great. That's all I have. Anybody else have questions? Thanks for sharing that. It's the link to that document is in the chat.
As Greg was
Right.
talking, I was just looking for that link so I could post it quietly without troubling Greg.
Yep. Thanks, Manoj. I was looking for it, but you got it there first. Appreciate that. And along with that, if you follow that link, like I said, it will take you into the Azure NetApp Files section of the Azure documentation. So you'll see all our other documentation in there as well, you know, from the capacity pool setup and all the things you saw on the slides. Most of that is in that documentation as well from a conceptual perspective, and then how do I do it and walk you through the steps.
Great. Thanks for sharing that.
All right. Are there any other questions?